At the end of the 11th century, the world of medieval Christendom was on fire. In 1095, Pope Urban II called upon Christians of Western Europe to take up arms and reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control. What followed was the First Crusade, an enormous military expedition that against all odds succeeded in capturing Jerusalem in 1099. But this was not the end, it was only the beginning. The crusading movement became one of the defining features of medieval Europe, and for the next several generations, kings, knights, and commoners would continue the cause. Among them was a young Norwegian king, Sigurd I, who would become the first European monarch to personally lead a crusade to the Holy Land. He would go down in history as Sigurd the Crusader. To understand why Sigurd joined the crusade, we must first understand the context of the time. The First Crusade had established several Christian states in the Levant, most notably the Kingdom of Jerusalem. However, these states were fragile, constantly under threat from Muslim powers, and in desperate need of military support. Pope Paschal II, like his predecessor, encouraged further expeditions to reinforce the gains made. Meanwhile, in Scandinavia, a new generation of rulers was rising, Christian kings in formerly pagan lands. These monarchs sought legitimacy not only through war and conquest, but also by aligning themselves with the religious and political movements of Christendom. For Sigurd, who came to power in the early 12th century, the Crusades offered an opportunity to cement his status as a Christian king, gain glory, and strengthen ties with the rest of Europe. Before Sigurd became a crusader, before he led a fleet across seas to fight in faraway lands, he was a child born into a kingdom of warriors, shifting loyalties, and newly embraced Christianity. Sigurd Magnusson was born around the year 1090, in a Norway still adapting to life as a unified Christian kingdom. His father was King Magnus III, more famously known as Magnus Barefoot, a bold and ambitious ruler who embodied the last spirit of the Viking warrior kings. Magnus had spent much of his reign expanding Norwegian influence, especially across the British Isles. He campaigned in Scotland, the Hebrides, the Isle of Man, and even parts of Ireland, territories that once formed part of the North Sea Empire. Sigurd's mother was Thora, a Norwegian noblewoman and one of Magnus's concubines. While not officially queen, Thora's position was respected and Sigurd was recognized as a legitimate son of the king. The royal succession in medieval Norway was often between multiple sons, whether born of wives or concubines could claim the throne, which frequently led to shared kingship or civil strife. Sigurd grew up in an environment shaped by both the Old Norse traditions and the rising tide of Christianity. By the time of his birth, Christianity had been established in Norway for just over a century, but pagan customs still lingered in many places. Sigurd's early childhood coincided with his father's intense military campaigns in Ireland, Scotland, and Norse Viking areas. King Magnus was often away, leading forces in the west, and during those years Sigurd would have remained in Norway under the guardianship of noble advisors and members of the court. These formative years shaped him as both a warrior and a ruler, observing from a young age the duties and burdens of kingship, as well as the rewards of glory and conquest. Magnus Barefoot died in 1103 when Sigurd was only about 13 or 14 years old during a campaign in Ireland. With Magnus's death, Norway was left without a clear single heir. In the absence of a primogeniture system, the kingdom was divided among Magnus's three sons, Sigurd, Eystein, and the youngest Olaf, who was still a child. The three brothers ruled jointly, an arrangement that had precedent in Norwegian history but was always delicate. Of the three, Sigurd was the eldest, the one with the greatest ambition for military exploits. While Eystein was content to govern at home, Sigurd wanted to go abroad to fight and to earn honor, both in the traditional Norse warrior sense and in the Christian ideal of pilgrimage. Despite their differing natures, the relationship between the two was remarkably peaceful, especially by the standards of medieval dynasties. While many brothers in European royal families turned on each other with swords, Sigurd and Eystein ruled side by side for years without civil war. It was an uneasy peace at times, and they did occasionally engage in subtle rivalry as recorded in the sagas, but they never took up arms against each other. This peaceful coexistence allowed Norway to stabilize and grow in strength, and it gave Sigurd the freedom to pursue something few kings had attempted before him, a journey to the Holy Land. Around the year 1107, Sigurd announced his intention to go on crusade, not just to pilgrimage, but to fight for the Christian cause in the East. He was inspired not only by faith, but also by ambition, honor, and the desire to be part of a movement that had captured the imagination of Christian Europe. While many nobles, knights, and lords had gone to the Holy Land during and after the First Crusade, Sigurd would become the first reigning European monarch to undertake the journey himself. Preparations began in earnest. A fleet was assembled, around 60 longships and thousands of men volunteered for the expedition. These were not ordinary crusaders, they were seasoned Norse warriors, descendants of Vikings, now sailing not to raid but to protect the Holy Land. In 1107, Sigurd set sail from Norway, leaving Eystein in charge of domestic affairs. The journey would take 4 years, cover thousands of kilometers, and pass through multiple kingdoms and battlefronts. The destination was Jerusalem, but the journey would take him through several regions of Europe, each presenting its own challenges and opportunities. His first major stop was England, ruled at the time by King Henry I, the youngest son of William the Conqueror. Sigurd and his men were received with hospitality. England and Norway shared a long and complex history marked by war, trade, and kinship. The visit was peaceful, and Sigurd likely used the opportunity to resupply and rest his forces. There are no records of conflict during this visit. After spending the winter in England, the Norwegian fleet resumed its voyage the following year. From England, Sigurd and his fleet sailed south along the Atlantic coast of the Iberian Peninsula, where they entered regions divided between Muslim-ruled territories and Christian kingdoms. During this part of the journey, Sigurd and his men engaged in battles against Muslim forces, offering support to local Christian rulers as part of the broader Reconquista movement to reclaim Iberian lands. The Norwegians engaged in several military actions along this route. In Galicia, located in the northwest of modern-day Spain, Sigurd fought against Muslim forces and supported local Christian rulers. As the fleet moved further south, Sigurd continued to engage Muslim positions along the coast, including areas near Lisbon and further toward the Strait of Gibraltar. These confrontations were not part of a coordinated campaign, but rather opportunistic engagements consistent with the broader goals of the Crusade. After passing through the Strait of Gibraltar, Sigurd's fleet entered the Mediterranean Sea, a rare and ambitious feat for Norse seafarers who traditionally navigated the North Atlantic. Their next major stop was the island of Sicily, ruled by the Normans under Count Roger II. The Normans had conquered Sicily from Muslim rulers in the decades prior, and the island had become a strong Christian kingdom in the Mediterranean. Sigurd was welcomed in Sicily, and the stay was peaceful. While the duration of his stay is not precisely known, it was likely used for resupply and preparation before the final leg of the voyage. From Sicily, Sigurd sailed toward the eastern Mediterranean. Around 1110, he and his forces arrived at Acre, one of the key port cities of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. This Crusader state had been established after the success of the First Crusade in 1099 and was ruled at the time by King Baldwin I. Baldwin received Sigurd with great honor. Baldwin was preparing a military campaign to capture Sidon, a strategically important coastal city still under Muslim control. Together, Sigurd and Baldwin laid siege to the city and succeeded in capturing it in late 1110. The victory was significant. It strengthened the coastal defenses of the Crusader states and gave them better access to maritime trade route. After the campaign, Sigurd was treated with honor. He visited Jerusalem, where he was shown the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and other sacred sites. It is said that he even left behind some of his ships and men to serve in the defense of the kingdom. Having fulfilled his crusading vow, Sigurd did not return the same way he came. Instead of sailing back to Norway, he traveled overland through the Byzantine Empire. In Constantinople, he was received with great honor by Emperor Alexios I Komnenos. The Byzantines had long sought Western allies against the Seljuk Turks, and Sigurd's journey symbolized Christian unity across the continent. Eventually, Sigurd returned to Norway in 1111. Having spent 4 years on the expedition, his return marked the end of one of the most extraordinary journeys in medieval Norwegian history. He was no longer just a king. He was now Sigurd Jorsalfar, meaning Sigurd the Jerusalem Farer or Sigurd the Crusader. The rest of Sigurd's reign was marked by relative peace and stability. Unlike many crusading kings, he returned with his power intact and his reputation enhanced. He ruled until his death in 1130, and though later years of Norwegian history would be troubled by civil war, Sigurd's reign stood out as a period of strength and connection to the wider Christian world.